Emma Reed clutched her threadbare carpet bag as the stagecoach rattled to a halt, sending a plume of dust into the crisp Colorado air. The bag contained all she had left in this world, a faded daguerreotype of her parents, a worn Bible, and a wedding dress sewn from her mother's curtains. Yet she lifted her chin with the determination that had carried her 2,000 miles from Boston to this rugged frontier town called Salida. The year was 1876. The nation had just celebrated its centennial while Emma had been burying her father, the last of her family, leaving her with nothing but debts and memories. The advertisement in the Boston Herald had been her salvation. Rancher seeks bride, passage paid, bring only yourself. She had written immediately, and Xavier Armstrong's reply had come just as quickly, his penmanship strong and assured as the man himself claimed to be. Now, as the driver handed her down from the coach, Emma smoothed her travel-worn skirt and gazed at the dusty main street of Salida. The small but growing town, nestled in the Arkansas River Valley, was surrounded by towering mountains, unlike anything she'd seen in Massachusetts. Shops, saloons, and wooden buildings lined the street, their facades weathered by the harsh Colorado elements. "Miss Reed." A deep voice pulled her attention from the unfamiliar landscape. Emma turned to find herself looking far up into the most striking blue eyes she had ever seen. They belonged to a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and wheat-colored hair that brushed the collar of his faded denim shirt. A Stetson hat was pushed back on his head, revealing a strong brow creased with what might have been concern. "Mr. Armstrong?" she asked, her voice smaller than she intended. He nodded once, his eyes taking in her slender frame, her copper-colored hair pulled back in a simple bun, and finally, her single, pathetic bag. His expression revealed nothing. "I'm afraid Emma began, feeling she should explain her lack of possessions, her lack of dowry, her lack of everything a man might expect from a wife. "You traveled light," he observed, cutting her off. His voice wasn't unkind, but it had the directness she was learning was common to Westerners. Emma swallowed hard. "Yes, I'm sorry, I couldn't bring. No need for apologies," Xavier interrupted again, reaching for her bag. His large, calloused hand brushed hers, sending an unexpected warmth up her arm. "You brought everything I need." Emma blinked in surprise, not certain she had heard correctly. "I beg your pardon," the corner of his mouth quirked up slightly. "You're here. That's what matters." He gestured toward a wagon parked nearby. "My ranch is about 10 miles outside town. We should get going if we want to make it before dark." As he helped her up onto the wagon seat, Emma studied his profile. Xavier Armstrong wasn't what she had expected. His advertisement had been straightforward to the point of being businesslike, and his letters, while polite, had been equally practical. She had prepared herself for a gruff older man desperate for a housekeeper more than a wife. Instead, she found herself beside a man who couldn't be more than 30, whose quiet strength was evident in every movement, and who had just said the most unexpectedly romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. The wagon lurched forward, and Emma gripped the seat. Xavier handled the reins with easy confidence, guiding the team of horses through town. "Have you eaten?" he asked, glancing at her. "Not since breakfast." Without another word, he pulled the wagon to a stop in front of a small establishment with a sign reading Hawkins Cafe. He jumped down and extended his hand to help her. "Mrs. Hawkins makes the best chicken and dumplings in Colorado Territory," he said. "Thought you might want a proper meal before we head to the ranch." Inside the cafe, the aroma of home cooking wrapped around Emma like an embrace. A plump, gray-haired woman bustled over, her face lighting up at the sight of Xavier. "Well, look what the wind blew in, and you must be the bride we've all been hearing about." The woman wiped her hands on her apron and extended one to Emma. "I'm Olivia Hawkins, and I'm pleased as punch to meet you, my dear." Emma shook her hand, startled by the warm welcome. "Emma Raid. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hawkins. Call me Olivia, everyone does. Now sit yourselves down. Xavier, you should have told me you were bringing her by. I'd have fixed something special." Xavier pulled out a chair for Emma. "Your regular cooking is special enough, Mrs. Hawkins." The older woman beamed and hurried back to the kitchen. "Everyone knows about me?" Emma asked quietly once they were seated. Xavier looked slightly uncomfortable. "Salida's not a big place. News travels fast." "And what exactly is the news?" She met his gaze directly. "Just that I sent for a bride from back east." He shrugged. "Folks are curious." "I see." Emma folded her hands in her lap. "Mr. Armstrong, I think we should discuss our arrangement." "Your letters were succinct. I understand you need someone to keep house, to cook, but I'm not entirely clear on." She felt heat rising in her cheeks. "On whether this is a marriage in name only," he finished for her, his voice low. Emma nodded, grateful he had understood without her having to speak the words aloud. Xavier leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Miss Reed, I sent for a wife, not a housekeeper. I expect a real marriage." His eyes softened. "But I also expect to give you time. I know this isn't easy, marrying a stranger, moving to a place so different from your home." Before Emma could respond, Olivia returned with plates heaped with chicken, dumplings, and vegetables. The conversation shifted to safer topics as they ate. The journey west, the town of Salida, the unusually mild weather they'd been having. It was nearly sunset when they finally left town. Emma sat quietly as the wagon rolled through increasingly rugged terrain. The mountains loomed larger, painted gold and purple by the setting sun. She had never seen anything so beautiful or so intimidating. "That's the ranch," Xavier said at last, pointing to a cluster of buildings nestled in a small valley ahead. Emma's heart quickened. This was to be her home. The main house was larger than she had expected, a solid two-story structure built of logs and stone. A barn, corral, and several smaller outbuildings completed the settlement. Smoke curled from the chimney, and lamplight glowed in the windows. "It's lovely," she said, and meant it. "It's not much compared to what you're used to in Boston." Emma laughed softly. "Mr. Armstrong, I'm afraid you have some misconception about me. I wasn't wealthy in Boston. After my father died, I was living in 2 rented rooms above a millinery shop." Xavier looked at her with new interest. "I assumed. Your letters were so well written. My father was a schoolteacher. He valued education." Emma smiled at the memory. "He would have been horrified to know I was using his lessons to correspond with a stranger about marriage." The wagon pulled up to the house, and Xavier set the brake before coming around to help her down. As her feet touched the ground, a bark sounded, and a large dog came bounding around the corner of the house. "That's Rusty," Xavier said as the dog skidded to a halt in front of them, tail wagging. "He won't hurt you." Emma held out her hand for the dog to sniff, then scratched behind his ears. "Hello, Rusty." The front door of the house opened, and an elderly man with a shock of white hair emerged. "About time you got back," he called. "I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind." "Miss Reed, this is Orville Jenkins," Xavier said. "He helps out around the ranch, though mostly he just bosses me around." The old man snorted as he approached. "Someone's got to keep him in line." He tipped his hat to Emma. "Pleasure to meet you, miss." "Don't believe a word this young fool says about me." Emma smiled, already warming to the man's straightforward manner. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Jenkins." "Orville, please. Mr. Jenkins was my father, God rest him." He peered at her single bag, which Xavier had retrieved from the wagon. "That all you brought?" Before Emma could feel embarrassed again, Xavier spoke up. Miss Reed travels light, Orville. No need for more. The old man nodded as if this made perfect sense. Smart. Too many folks weigh themselves down with things they don't need. He turned toward the house. Well, come on in. I've got stew on the stove and I made up the spare room for Miss Reed. Xavier led her into the house, setting her bag down in the entryway. The interior was simpler than the outside had suggested, but clean and well-maintained. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with comfortable-looking chairs drawn up before it. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with volumes that made Emma's heart leap with unexpected joy. "You like to read?" Xavier asked, noticing her gaze. "Very much," she admitted. "I didn't expect a cowboy to have books." There was no offense in his tone, only amusement. "I didn't expect so many," she amended diplomatically. Orville chuckled as he stirred something on the large cook stove. His mother's influence. She was a schoolmarm before she married Xavier's father. Insisted her son would be educated, frontier or no frontier. "My mother died when I was 14, Xavier explained. "But by then, the damage was done. I was hopelessly addicted to books." Emma felt a connection spark between them. "My father was the same with me. He said books were windows to worlds we might never see." Smart man. Xavier's eyes held hers for a moment before he looked away. "Let me show you to your room. You must be tired after your journey." He led her up a narrow staircase to a small but tidy bedroom. A patchwork quilt covered the bed and curtains framed a window that would look out over the valley in daylight. "This will be yours until—" Xavier cleared his throat. "Until after the wedding. I thought we might go into town tomorrow, speak to the preacher." Emma's heart fluttered. "So soon?" "Unless you need more time," he said quickly. "I don't want to rush you." She thought about it for a moment. She had come all this way for this very purpose. What would be gained by waiting? "Tomorrow is fine," she said. Relief flickered across his face. "Good, I'll leave you to settle in. Supper will be ready soon." After he left, Emma sank onto the bed, the reality of her situation finally hitting her. She was going to marry a man she had just met, a man who lived in a world entirely different from the one she knew. A man who had looked at her single, pitiful bag and said she had brought everything he needed. She unpacked her few possessions, hanging her wedding dress carefully in the small wardrobe. It wasn't much of a dress, just her mother's old lace curtains recut and stitched together, but it was white and it was pretty. And tomorrow, it would be her wedding gown. At supper, Orville kept the conversation lively with stories of the early days of the ranch and tales of Xavier's youth that made the normally reserved man flush with embarrassment. "Enough of that," Xavier said at last. "Miss Reed doesn't need to hear about every foolish thing I did as a boy." "On the contrary," Emma said, smiling, "I find it quite illuminating." Xavier's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a spark of humor, of connection. For the first time since arriving, Emma felt a flicker of hope that this arrangement might become something more than practical. After the meal, Orville excused himself, claiming exhaustion, though Emma suspected he was giving them time alone. She helped Xavier clear the table and wash the dishes, falling into an easy rhythm with him. "You don't have to do that," he said when she picked up a towel to dry. "I don't mind. It's faster with two." They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes before Xavier spoke again. "I want you to know, I don't expect you to be a servant here. This will be your home, not just a place where you work." Emma appreciated the sentiment, even as she wondered what her role would be if not primarily as a housekeeper. "What do you expect then?" Xavier set down the plate he was washing and turned to face her fully. "I expect us to be partners. I need help, yes. Running a ranch isn't easy, but I also—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I also want a family, children someday. A real home, not just a house." The honesty in his voice touched her. "Those are things I want too," she admitted. "I've been alone since my father died. I miss being part of a family." Something eased in Xavier's expression. "Then perhaps this arrangement will suit us both." Later, lying in bed, Emma listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the Colorado night, the distant howl of a coyote, the soft hooting of an owl, the creak of the house settling. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Emma Armstrong. The thought was both terrifying and strangely comforting. She had come west with nothing but hope and desperation. Xavier had said she brought everything he needed. She wondered if he would still think so in a year's time. In 5 years. In 20. Morning dawned clear and bright. Emma dressed carefully in her best traveling outfit, saving her wedding dress for the ceremony. When she descended the stairs, she found Xavier waiting, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt with a string tie. He looked handsome and nervous. "Good morning," he said, standing as she entered. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." It wasn't entirely a lie. After tossing and turning for hours, she had eventually fallen into a deep sleep. Orville emerged from the kitchen with coffee and biscuits. "Eat up," he ordered. "Can't get married on an empty stomach." The ride into town was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Salida looked different in the morning light, busier, more vibrant. People nodded and called greetings to Xavier as they passed, curious eyes taking in Emma at his side. The preacher, Reverend Wallace, was a kind-faced man who welcomed them warmly into the small church. "Xavier sent word you'd be coming," he explained to Emma. "My wife's just finishing up a few preparations." A plump woman with rosy cheeks appeared, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. "For the bride," she said, pressing them into Emma's hands. "Every bride should have flowers." Touched by the thoughtfulness, Emma thanked her. "I should change," she said, suddenly aware that her travel outfit was hardly wedding attire. Mrs. Wallace showed her to a small side room where she could put on her improvised wedding dress. As Emma changed, she heard voices outside, more than just Xavier and the Wallaces. Curious, she peeked out to see the church filling with people. "Word got out," Mrs. Wallace explained with a smile when she returned. "Folks were eager to welcome you." Emma wasn't sure whether to be touched or mortified. Her dress, which had seemed adequate in the privacy of her room, now felt painfully inadequate for such a public ceremony. "You look lovely, Mrs. Wallace assured her, adjusting the lace at Emma's throat. "Just lovely." When Emma emerged, the church had filled with what seemed like half the town. Xavier stood at the altar, looking simultaneously proud and terrified. Their eyes met across the small sanctuary, and something in his gaze steadied her. She walked toward him with measured steps, clutching her wildflower bouquet like a lifeline. The ceremony was brief, but meaningful. They exchanged vows, promised to cherish and honor one another, and Xavier slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. When Reverend Wallace pronounced them man and wife, Xavier hesitated only a moment before leaning down to place a gentle kiss on her lips there first. It was over so quickly that Emma hardly had time to process what had happened before they were surrounded by well-wishers. Townspeople pressed forward to introduce themselves, offering congratulations and invitations to call. Olivia Hawkins presented them with a small cake, and someone produced bottles of cider for toasts. "Welcome to Salida, Mrs. Armstrong," people said again and again, until Emma felt dizzy with names and faces. Through it all, Xavier stayed close, his hand occasionally touching her elbow or the small of her back, not possessive, but protective, steadying. When they finally escaped and climbed back into the wagon, Emma exhaled deeply. "I wasn't expecting so many people." Xavier looked slightly embarrassed. "I should have warned you. I didn't realize Reverend Wallace would spread the word." It's all right. Everyone was very kind. She smoothed the lace of her dress. I just wish I'd had something more appropriate to wear. Xavier's eyes moved over her dress. You look beautiful. The dress is. It suits you. It's made from curtains, she confessed, then immediately wondered why she had shared that. To her surprise, Xavier laughed, a warm, rich sound she hadn't heard from him before. Well, they're the prettiest curtains I've ever seen. The tension broke and Emma found herself laughing too. My mother would be horrified. She loved those curtains. I'm sure she'd understand. His expression sobered. And I'm sure she'd be proud of you. The simple statement, offered so sincerely, brought unexpected tears to Emma's eyes. She blinked them away quickly. Thank you. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the events of the morning settling around them like the dust from the road. Olivia packed us a picnic, Xavier said suddenly. I thought we might stop by the river on the way home, if you'd like. Home. The word sent a flutter through Emma's chest. I'd like that very much. He directed the horses off the main trail, following a smaller path that wound down toward the Arkansas River. The spot he chose was shaded by cottonwood trees, with a view of the mountains reflecting in the clear water. Xavier spread a blanket on the ground and unpacked the basket. Olivia had prepared cold chicken, bread, cheese, and even a small bottle of wine. This is lovely, Emma said, settling on the blanket. Do you come here often? Xavier shook his head as he poured wine into 2 tin cups. Not lately. I used to fish here as a boy. He handed her a cup. To new beginnings, he said, raising his own. To new beginnings, she echoed, sipping the sweet wine. They ate slowly, talking more easily than they had before. Xavier told her about the ranch, how his father had established it after coming west from Pennsylvania, how they'd struggled through lean years, how he'd expanded it after his father's death 5 years earlier. And your mother? Emma asked. You said she died when you were 14. Consumption. Xavier's face tightened with the memory. It took her quick. One winter she was fine, by spring she was gone. I'm sorry. Emma knew the inadequacy of the words. My mother died when I was 12, childbirth. The baby my brother died too. Xavier reached across the blanket and touched her hand briefly. Seems we have that in common then, losing mothers too young. They were quiet for a moment, the shared understanding creating a new bond between them. Tell me about your father, Xavier said at last. You mentioned he was a teacher, Emma nodded, smiling at the memory. He taught at a small academy in Boston. He loved learning, loved passing knowledge on to others. Her smile faded. After Mother died, he changed. He still taught, still cared for me, but the joy went out of him. He started drinking too much. Last winter, he caught pneumonia. The doctor said his body was too weakened to fight it. Is that when you decided to answer my advertisement? Not immediately. Emma looked out over the river. I tried to find work in Boston, but the only positions open to a woman alone were as a factory worker or a domestic servant. The factory would have killed me slowly, and I couldn't bear the thought of being at someone else's beck and call, having no life of my own. So instead you chose to marry a stranger and move 2,000 miles away. There was no judgment in Xavier's voice, just curiosity. Emma met his gaze directly. I chose to take a chance on having a real life, a home, maybe a family someday. Was that foolish of me? No, he said quietly. It was brave. The word warmed her more than the wine had. No one had ever called her brave before. As they packed up the remains of their picnic, Emma felt a strange new sensation, not quite happiness, but something like hope. This man she had married was still largely a mystery to her, but she was beginning to think he might be a man worth knowing. Back at the ranch, Orville had prepared a special supper to celebrate their marriage. He decorated the table with more wildflowers and had baked an apple pie for dessert. The small kindness brought tears to Emma's eyes, which she hastily blinked away before either man could notice. After supper, Orville excused himself with a meaningful glance at Xavier. "Think I'll head to my cabin early tonight. Let you newlyweds have some privacy." When they were alone, an awkward silence fell. They were husband and wife now, but still strangers in so many ways. Xavier cleared his throat. "Would you like to sit by the fire for a while?" Emma nodded, grateful for the reprieve. They settled into the chairs before the hearth, the dancing flames providing both warmth and something to look at besides each other. "I've been thinking," Xavier said after a long moment. "There's no rush for everything that being married entails. I meant what I said about giving you time." The relief that flooded Emma was tempered with confusion. Did he not find her attractive? Or was he truly being considerate? "I appreciate that," she said carefully. "But I don't want you to feel I'm not holding up my end of our agreement." Xavier turned to face her, his expression serious. "This isn't just an agreement to me, Emma. It's a marriage. I want it to be real in all ways, but I don't want you to feel obligated." The tenderness in his voice touched her. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat quietly for a while longer, the fire crackling between them until Emma stifled a yawn. "You should get some rest," Xavier said, standing. "It's been a long day." Emma nodded and rose as well. "Good night, then." "Good night, wife," he said the last word softly, almost experimentally. Upstairs in her room, still her room, at least for now, Emma changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed. Wife. She was someone's wife now. The thought was still so strange. She twisted the unfamiliar ring on her finger, thinking about Xavier. He was not what she had expected. Kinder, more thoughtful, more educated, and surprisingly patient. She had come west prepared to fulfill whatever duties were required of her, including those of the marriage bed. His willingness to wait, to give her time to know him better, spoke of a respect she hadn't anticipated. Perhaps, she thought as she slipped under the covers, she had brought more than nothing after all. Perhaps she had brought exactly what Xavier Armstrong needed: someone to share his life, his home, his future. Someone who might, in time, share his heart as well. The next few weeks established a pattern to their days. Emma rose early to prepare breakfast, then spent the morning learning the layout of the ranch and the rhythm of its operations. Xavier worked from dawn till dusk, tending to cattle, repairing fences, and all the endless tasks that came with running a successful ranch. They took their midday meal separately, Emma usually at the house, Xavier wherever his work had taken him, but reunited for supper, often joined by Orville. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, sometimes reading, sometimes talking, getting to know each other in small, careful increments. Emma discovered that Xavier's love of books extended to poetry, that he could quote Wordsworth and Whitman with equal ease. He learned that she had a quick mind for numbers and soon handed over the ranch's account books to her capable hands. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. They shared stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Emma told him about her brief engagement to a banker's son in Boston, broken when his family objected to her lack of dowry. Xavier confessed that he had nearly married the daughter of a neighboring rancher 2 years earlier, only to discover she had no interest in ranch life and was merely using him as an escape from her father's strict rules. She wanted to move to Denver, he said with a wry smile. Said she was tired of dirt and cattle and endless work. "And you weren't willing to leave the ranch?" Emma asked. Xavier looked around the room, his gaze taking in the home his parents had built. "This land is in my blood. I can't imagine living anywhere else." He turned back to her. "Does that disappoint you?" Emma considered the question honestly. A month ago, she might have said yes. But now, Having experienced the raw beauty of the mountains, the satisfaction of work done with her own hands, the peace that came with evenings like this, she found she couldn't imagine leaving either. "No," she said, "it doesn't disappoint me at all." The pleasure that lit his face was worth any sacrifice she might have made. As September gave way to October, the aspens turned gold and the nights grew colder. Xavier began coming in earlier, spending more time with Emma in the evenings. Their conversations flowed more easily, punctuated by comfortable silences that no longer felt awkward. One evening, as they sat before the fire, Xavier reading aloud from Leaves of Grass, while Emma mended one of his shirts, he paused mid-verse. "You're still sleeping in the spare room," he said abruptly, Emma's hands stilled on her sewing. "Yes, are you? Do you want to continue that arrangement?" The question hung in the air between them. Emma set aside her mending and looked at him directly. "Do you?" Xavier closed the book and set it on the side table. "No." The word was simple, direct, honest. "I've come to care for you, Emma, more than I expected to, more than I thought possible when I sent that advertisement." Emma's heart quickened. "I've come to care for you too," she admitted softly. He rose from his chair and crossed to kneel before her. "Then perhaps it's time we truly became husband and wife." That night, for the first time, Emma shared Xavier's bed. Their coming together was gentle, tentative at first, then increasingly passionate as they discovered each other. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms, Emma felt a sense of rightness, of belonging that she had never known before. "Are you all right?" Xavier whispered into her hair. "Yes," she said and meant it. "More than all right." He tightened his arms around her. "When I sent for a mail-order bride, I never expected to find someone like you. I thought I was getting a housekeeper, a practical arrangement. Instead I got everything." Emma lifted her head to look at him. "You once said I brought everything you needed. What did you mean?" Xavier's hand came up to stroke her cheek. "I meant that you, just you, were enough. I didn't need you to bring possessions or money, but now I realize it was more than that. You brought courage and intelligence and a heart that matches this land in its beauty." He kissed her gently. "You brought yourself, Emma, and that truly is everything I need." As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, Emma and Xavier settled into their new life together. The easy affection they shared in private began to spill over into their daily interactions, a touch as they passed each other, a smile across the room, a quick kiss before Xavier went out to work. Emma blossomed in her role as ranch wife. She took over the household accounts, discovering a talent for management that impressed even Orville. She planted a late garden and put up preserves for winter. She learned to bake bread in the temperamental wood stove and mastered the art of cooking for hungry ranch hands. One cold November morning, Emma woke feeling nauseated. She dismissed it as a passing illness, but when the same feeling returned the next day and the next, a suspicion began to form. She confided in Olivia Hawkins during a visit to town, and the older woman confirmed what Emma had begun to suspect. She was with child. "How do I tell him?" Emma asked, both excited and nervous about Xavier's reaction. Olivia patted her hand. "Just tell him straight out. That man looks at you like you hung the moon. He'll be over the moon himself at this news." That evening, after supper, Emma asked Xavier to take a walk with her despite the chill in the air. They bundled up and strolled toward the creek that ran behind the house, their breath making clouds in the frosty air. "I have something to tell you," Emma said when they reached a small footbridge Xavier had built the previous month. He turned to her, his expression curious. "Is something wrong?" "No," she smiled, taking his hands in hers. "Something is very right. Xavier, I'm going to have a baby." For a moment he stared at her, uncomprehending. Then his face transformed with joy. He let out a whoop that echoed across the valley, lifted her off her feet, and spun her in a circle. "Careful," she laughed. "I'm feeling a bit delicate these days." He set her down immediately, his expression changing to concern. "I'm sorry, are you all right? Should you be resting? Do you need to see the doctor?" Emma laughed again, touching his cheek. "I'm perfectly fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, you know. Not my woman, not my baby." His voice grew serious as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." The wonder in his voice brought tears to Emma's eyes. "Our baby," she agreed. As winter settled over the valley, bringing snow and bitter cold, Emma and Xavier prepared for the new life that would join them in the spring. Xavier built a cradle, carefully sanding every inch until it was smooth as silk. Emma sewed tiny garments and quilted a blanket from scraps of fabric donated by the women of Salida, who had embraced her as one of their own. Christmas came, their first as a married couple. They decorated the house with pine boughs and red berries, and Xavier surprised Emma with a rocking chair he'd ordered from Denver. "For when you're nursing our little one," he explained as she ran her hands over the smooth wood. Emma's gift to him was more modest, a hand-knitted scarf and a book of Robert Frost's poetry she'd found in a catalog. But the real gift, they both knew, was the life growing inside her. As the new year of 1877 began, a terrible blizzard swept through the valley. Xavier and the ranch hands worked tirelessly to protect the cattle, battling wind and snow to bring the animals to shelter. Emma kept the fire blazing and food ready, worrying each time Xavier went back out into the storm. On the third day of the blizzard, Xavier came in half carrying Orville, whose face was gray with pain. "His horse slipped in the snow," Xavier explained as they eased the old man onto the sofa. "I think his leg is broken." Emma moved quickly, heating water and gathering clean cloth for bandages. As she helped Xavier set and splint Orville's leg, she was struck by how naturally they worked together, anticipating each other's needs without words. "You two make a good team," Orville observed through gritted teeth. "Guess Xavier knew what he was doing when he sent for you, Emma." Emma exchanged a glance with her husband. "I think we both got lucky," she said softly. The blizzard eventually passed, leaving behind drifts taller than a man. The ranch had weathered the storm with minimal losses, a testament to Xavier's preparation and quick action. Orville's leg would heal, though he complained bitterly about being confined indoors. As February turned to March, Emma's body changed more visibly. Xavier treated her as if she were made of glass, constantly asking if she was comfortable, if she needed anything. His protectiveness was both touching and occasionally frustrating. "I'm pregnant, not ill," she reminded him one evening when he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry upstairs. "I just want to take care of you," he said, looking so earnest that she couldn't be annoyed. "I know." She stood on tiptoe to kiss him. "And I love you for it, but I need to feel useful." His arms went around her, careful of her growing belly. "You are useful. You're growing our child. That's the most important work on this ranch right now." April brought the first wildflowers and the busiest time on the ranch as calving season began. Xavier worked from before dawn until after dark, often coming in too exhausted to do more than eat a quick supper before falling into bed. Emma worried about him pushing himself too hard, but she understood the necessity. A successful calving season meant security for the coming year for them and for their growing family. One evening, Xavier came in later than usual. Emma had kept his supper warm, but he waved it away, coming straight to where she sat by the fire. "I need to show you something," he said, offering her his hand. "Can you come outside for a moment?" Curious, Emma followed him out onto the porch. The night was cool but not cold, the sky ablaze with stars. "What is it?" she asked. Xavier pointed to a spot just beyond the corral. "There. Do you see it?" Emma squinted in the darkness, then gasped. In the moonlight she could make out the framework of a new structure. "What is it?" she asked, though she had an inkling. "A school," Xavier said, his voice warm with pride. "Just a small one to start, but I've been talking to families from the surrounding ranches. There are enough children within riding distance to justify hiring a teacher." Emma turned to him, her heart full. "A school? But why?" Xavier took her hands in his. "Because you're a teacher's daughter, because education matters to you, and because our child and any others who come after deserve the same opportunities we had." He paused, suddenly looking uncertain. "I thought maybe when the baby is older you might want to teach there yourself." Tears filled Emma's eyes. "You would do this for me, build a school." "I would do anything for you," he said simply. "You've brought so much to this ranch, to my life. I wanted to give something back." Emma threw her arms around him as best she could with her swollen belly between them. "I love you, Xavier Armstrong." His arms tightened around her. "And I love you, Emma Armstrong." They brought warm days and the final preparations for the baby's arrival. The local midwife, Mrs. Thornton, visited regularly to check on Emma's progress, declaring her healthy and the baby well-positioned. "Won't be long now," she predicted during her mid-May visit. "This little one is eager to meet the world." Xavier grew increasingly anxious as the due date approached. He arranged for extra hands to help with the ranch work so he could stay closer to home. He read every book on childbirth he could find, peppering Mrs. Thornton with questions until the midwife finally threw up her hands. "Men," she exclaimed to Emma, "always thinking they can study their way through things that women have been managing since Eve." Emma just smiled, touched by Xavier's concern and determination to be prepared. The baby arrived on the first day of June, after a labor that lasted through the night and into the morning. Xavier refused to leave Emma's side despite Mrs. Thornton's initial attempts to banish him to the porch with the other anxious husbands she'd attended. "He stays," Emma insisted through a contraction. "I need him." And so Xavier stayed, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement as she worked to bring their child into the world. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and squalling, Xavier wept unashamedly. Mrs. Thornton placed the swaddled infant in Emma's arms, and Xavier sat beside them on the bed, his arm around his wife, his eyes fixed on the tiny face of his son. "He's perfect," Xavier whispered. "Just perfect." They named him Oliver Thomas Armstrong, Oliver for Emma's grandfather, Thomas for Xavier's father. In the days that followed, Xavier moved the rocking chair into their bedroom so Emma could nurse Oliver comfortably. He would sit for hours watching them, a look of wonder on his face. "What are you thinking?" Emma asked one evening as she rocked their son to sleep. "I'm thinking that a year ago I was alone," Xavier said quietly. "The ranch was successful, but the house was empty. I had Orville and the hands, but no family of my own." He reached out to touch Oliver's tiny hand. "And now look at what I have." "All because you placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride," Emma teased gently. "All because you were brave enough to answer it." Xavier's eyes met hers. "You arrived with nothing but yourself, Emma, and that has made all the difference." As summer bloomed across the valley, turning the meadows to carpets of wildflowers, Emma often sat on the porch with Oliver, watching Xavier work on the schoolhouse. It was taking shape quickly, with help from neighbors who shared his vision of education for their children. Orville, his leg healed but still using a cane, took to sitting with Emma, offering unsolicited advice on child rearing and marriage that made her laugh. "That boy is happier than I've ever seen him," the old man confided one afternoon. Before you came, he worked himself to exhaustion every day, fell into bed, got up and did it all again. No joy in it. And now, Emma asked, curious about how Orville perceived the change in Xavier. Now he works with purpose, Orville said. Makes a difference. He's building something that'll last beyond him. A family, a legacy. The old man nodded toward the schoolhouse. A community. Emma looked out at her husband, sawing boards in the summer heat, his shirt sticking to his back with sweat. She remembered the man who had met her at the stagecoach less than a year ago, reserved, cautious, alone. The man who had looked at her single carpet bag and said she had brought everything he needed. Now she understood what he had meant. He hadn't needed her possessions or her dowry. He had needed her heart, her strength, her willingness to build a life with him. And she had needed him too, his steadiness, his quiet strength, his capacity for love that matched her own. She had come west with nothing but hope. What she had found was everything. Late that night, with Oliver sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Emma curled against Xavier in their bed. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice a rumble in the darkness. Emma thought about the question. Was she happy? She was exhausted from caring for an infant. She missed hot baths and easy access to shops. The work of a ranch wife was never done, and the isolation could be challenging. But she had a husband who loved her, a son who was healthy and strong, a home that was truly hers. She had purpose and belonging. She had a future bright with promise. "Yes," she said, lifting her face to his. "I am completely, utterly happy." Xavier's kiss was gentle but filled with promise. "So am I," he whispered against her lips, "more than I ever thought possible." As they drifted toward sleep, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from a desperate young woman with nothing to her name to a wife, a mother, a vital part of this ranch and this community. She had arrived as a mail-order bride with nothing. But Xavier had been right all along. She had brought everything they both needed. Years later, when the schoolhouse had grown to accommodate 36 children from surrounding ranches, when Oliver had been joined by 2 sisters and a brother, when the Armstrong Ranch had become known throughout Colorado for its fine cattle and its generous hospitality, Emma would sometimes take out her old carpet bag from the attic. She would run her hands over the worn fabric and remember that long-ago day when she had stepped off the stagecoach in Salida, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. "What are you doing up here?" Xavier would ask, finding her among the dust and memories. "Just remembering," she would say, smiling up at the lines that time and weather had etched into his beloved face. "Remembering how it all began." And he would take her hand, helping her to her feet, drawing her close despite the gray in her hair and the extra pounds the years and children had added to her frame. "Best decision I ever made," he would say, putting that advertisement in the paper. "Best decision I ever made," she would counter, answering it. Then they would go downstairs together, to the noise and chaos and joy of the life they had built from nothing but love and determination, and the belief that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with empty hands and full hearts.